In my experience, yes, and that's not the same thing that was kind of told to me as a child. Chamber music is eine kleine Nachtmusik, and Beethoven's symphonies are everything else, you know. As I got older and people introduced me to the things that I now love and hold dear, the music and the composers that are part of my life, and through my work with Kronos, where it's just an ever-expanding world. You know, Kronos has redefined what the string quartet can do, and who a string quartet can be a platform for. And Kronos Quartet hasn't played Mozart in, I think, 49.99 years. And so
well,
that's...
Well, you mentioned Kronos. Talk to us about Kronos, since you mentioned it already. For anybody who doesn't know what it is and your involvement and this sort of what I now know is the spreading influence of the people we see here connected with it and so on.
Right, well, the Kronos Quartet is sort of the ensemble that dug the channels that my entire generation now swims freely through. They started 50 years ago, sort of the world's most prominent, I would say, new music group, even though it's not really new music. There's ancient music there. The first group, I think, to play Jimi Hendrix at Carnegie Hall, commissioned over 1,100 pieces of music over the course of 50 years, and really paved the way for me as a cellist and an artist to feel comfortable breaking the rules. And they sort of, through their recordings and just their presence, gave me permission to go a little bit wild with my own artistic endeavors and, you know, feel comfortable starting composition, just starting to write music, even though I didn't go to school for it. No one said, hey, you should write music. It was just kind of following my heart. And because of Kronos and all of these boundaries that they have brought down over the years, kind of allowed me to do that through, they work with artists all around the world. Even if they're not a classical musician, they might be an Inuk throat singer, and they will say, you are now a composer. Please write us a piece. And Tanya Tagaq, this great throat singer, wrote a piece for Kronos Quartet in the form of a 4-layered multi-track recording of her doing these incredible vocalizations. And then Kronos kind of paired her with an arranger and someone to interpret that and work with her to create a string quartet that the world has never heard the likes of before. It's full of these beautiful groanings. And anyhow, the point is, somehow this group that I've idolized my entire life, I joined this group 2 years ago, and I'm now the cellist of the Kronos Quartet. So it's really like someone asked me to join Led Zeppelin or Pink Floyd or something. You know, it's just absolutely wild. And the mission of the quartet is to see what chamber music can do for the world, for Earth, for society, see how closely we can work with activists and address issues like climate change, human civil rights, nuclear disarmament, war, everything that we possibly can to see what chamber music can do. And Kronos has the platform to be able to do that.
It's my understanding, though, that it doesn't stop there in terms of personnel. That the world around you is spreading in Kronos.
That is very true. So Hank Dutt and John Sherba, the violist and second violinist of the Kronos Quartet, who have been there for 46 and 45 years respectively, when I joined 2 years ago, after about a year, you know, we were talking about the future, and the idea of retirement for them came up. And Hank, I believe, is 72 years old. John is, I'm not sure, a couple years younger. And Hank said, you know what? You know who would be a great successor? What about Ayani? Ayane
partner,
Kozasa, my partner.
your stage partner, and
and she's
partner.
here. You may have seen her a few minutes ago in the Bieber, going wild on the viola. And I kept my mouth shut, and I said, "Interesting idea." And then David Harrington, the first violinist, said, Ayane would be a great fit. So Ayane will be the next violist of the Kronos Quartet. It's quite unbelievable to me. And then we put it to a vote, and that'd be great. And then our new second violinist is Gabriela Diaz, who also was Ayane's stand partner.
Who was also just on stage.
Just on stage. So we're calling ourselves here the Chrono Quartet. It's 3 out of the 4 of us. So the future is very, very bright, and Kronos has this incredible worldwide platform to really do some good work.
You told me that if there's a theme to this year's chamber music, that it's humanity. But it was also, it seemed to me, listening to the things that you've programmed so far in the season, that there's a lyricism to a lot of the programs, and maybe like a kind of a hidden message in all of that is, hey people, just because it's contemporary music doesn't mean that it's strident, ugly, sometimes unlistenable, that lyricism can exist for living composers.
I hope that that's what we take away from this year, from chamber music, that there's really, the word new is not a bad word. There's nothing to be afraid of. In fact, new is what is responsible for life. And it's been a really interesting journey so far to program these pieces, old and new, all together, and to, some of the newer works really sound more simple and more beautiful and more almost more traditional in my mind than some of the old works, like the Bieber today was just full of cacophony and polyphony and extended techniques and all of these words that we associate with Xenakis and John Cage and these kind of scary new music composers, whereas it's just that's really a biased way of looking at things, and something that we're taught very early on is that new things are bad and traditional things are really to be respected, which is, we're trying to respect everything and everyone here, and the composers especially that are alive today it's really a golden age of chamber music, and I've said this before. The composers are people like me who have taught themselves to write music because they love it so much. I love music so much that I feel there's music in me that I need to get onto the page for. Composition is a terrible way of making money. It's the worst time to money. It's the worst way you could possibly spend your time, and yet I have to do it. I have to find that extra 45 minutes in a hotel room after a Kronos concert to just jot down. It just because I love it, and for no other reason. And there are thousands of people just like me who are writing incredible music, who they're not trying to revolutionize things or trying to break down tradition or trying to be new for the sake of being new, or trying to just challenge us for the sake of challenging us. It's a way of expressing their humanity.
Is it that you choose those composers who express that, or is it in a sense that beauty is back as opposed to cacophony?
Both, music, all music, not just chamber music, is really a reflection of the state of the world in which the composer is living, and that can mean many things. It can mean politics, the environment. It can mean whether you loved or hate the era of music that came before you, and whether you're simply rebelling against your predecessor, which is a very common theme throughout music history is, well, we've had enough of that. Let's just, turn the tables all the way around, or we've just been through a world war, and what kind of music do we need now? Or we need to reinvent what German music means after World War II. Things like this. This is how eras of music are born. But also we've been through a pandemic together, and that has changed music. And that has made us all, it's made us appreciate the value of being in a room together, and for composition, it's just very moving how real music has become to so many of us. It's not just a job or a skill or a craft. It's really life, and that became so clear in 2022 and
back up
2020.
Back up to 2020. What happened to you as a composer when the world shut down?
I talked a little bit about this before we performed Marejada, a piece by Angelica Negron. I think that was program 2, which she wrote for Kronos Quartet during the pandemic, the height of the pandemic, 2022. And that piece was meant to be performed over Zoom. So the pressure was off in terms of trying to play together, trying to coordinate every movement. It was simply a way of enjoying making music with people you love remotely. So there's a kind of a heartbreaking aspect of it, but also this extremely hopeful, and she adapts to the new world with that piece. And that new world, for a lot of musicians, it was dark, and it was the thought of live performance coming to a halt forever was an actual possibility on many of our minds. That live performance is just too dangerous, too risky, and that's a hard thing to deal with when music is your life, and performing and sharing the things that you love is in this format, to be able to share a space. And even just to talk here with you all in the room, I have a new appreciation for that after COVID, because we do a lot of pre-concert video things before a piece. A presenter will say, hey Paul, we're going to play your piece on this remote performance. Would you mind recording a video introduction that we can include at the beginning of the live stream? And I did, dozens of those during the pandemic. So even this means more to be in the room with all of you now than it did pre-2020, and even more so for musical performance. And that is reflected, I think, in the music that we're generating now as a society. There's an appreciation for everything, for more things, including cacophony and beauty and tradition and rule breaking.
Do you consider yourself a cellist first or a composer first?
Gosh. I consider myself a Google Calendar scheduler first. It's interesting, cello feels like less and less, a smaller and smaller percentage of what I do. Yet everything that I do, including with Kronos and sort of discussing the future of that and planning Spoleto chamber music, it's in service of those 10 minutes that we get up here and just get to do the thing for everyone. And those 10 minutes just become more increasingly cherished in my life. Because there's a lot of other things that you have to do to make a great concert happen. But in the deepest part of my heart, I am a cellist first. Since I started playing cello when I was 5, I wrote my first concert work maybe when I was 25. In a way, I feel like a composer. In my whole being, I feel like a composer. But there's that little ticking, like pilot light that's like, you're a cellist, you're a cellist, you're always going to be a cellist, you know.
How did you happen to be a cellist at the age of 5? Why the cello, not the violin, the viola, the double bass or something?
Well, similar to Sterling Elliott, who he told everyone that his mother actually bought a cello for him before he was born, which is incredible. Just had it ready for him. It's pretty intense. So my older sister is a concert violinist and a composer, and I have 2 older sisters. The other one was a pianist when we were kids, and my mother is an amateur violist, and they would have sight reading parties at the house when I was a baby. And the story is that whenever there was a cello solo or something, I gravitated toward the cello, and that I was soothed by it, which I like, who isn't, right? The funny thing is that she said I would cry when they played Hindemith, and I would be very happy when they played Mozart. So
That's funny. That you had that recognition of something even then.
right, there's something about that.
Was your family a particularly musical family? What about your father?
My father was he did many things. He was worked in geophysics and oil exploration. This was in the 60s. And he was a cartographer and an engineer, eventually settled into documentary filmmaking. So he was a very, very pragmatic, logical person. And he saw me getting more and more involved in music. He did play the harmonica, but he said, Paul, I don't know about the cello thing. Are you sure? He just wanted me to...
Or like my mother, get a real job?
I didn't want to put it that way, but essentially, yes. But, as an artist himself and as an explorer and a traveler, he wanted me to get a sense of what my options were before just channeling my vision down to music. And at that point in my life, in high school and in college, it really felt like it was this kind of, I loved cinema as well, and architecture, and kind of letting those things go in terms of focus points for a career, and just focusing on music. And now I feel like things are opening back up through Spoleto and through Kronos, where music is simply a gateway into what really matters, which is trying to make the world a better place. And that's really, really exciting for me.
How did you evolve into composing?
Let's see. It was a long journey. So when I was 5 years old, 6 years old, I would be at home practicing. And, I was supposed to be practicing. I would be watching TV and just sitting with my cello, and my mom would come home. She learned to feel the TV to check if it was warm still.
The vibrations of...
No, if I had turned it off when I heard her
it was
carpool,
warm.
it would still be warm. We didn't have the LED TV back then.
This was in San Clemente?
In San Clemente, California. And so I would hear her car come in, I'd turn the TV off, and I'd scatter my music all over the floor, as if that's what you do when you've been practicing hard. The music is flying all over the place. So she knew right away. She's like, why is your music all over? And what I love to do, much more than practice scales and etudes, was just improvise. And I wasn't particularly discouraged from improvising, but I knew that it sort of had to be a secret, just to, learn a Jimi Hendrix guitar solo on the cello, or sort of start teaching myself some jazz licks. That my heart was really in that, and that's actually how I got better. It wasn't through. I still have a hard time playing a normal scale in tune. So that bug, I got that bug fairly early, of just kind of creating my own music. To be a composer, though, that was completely off the table. I knew, I would never be a Mozart or a Beethoven. And then in college, I started arranging music for bands, local bands in Los Angeles, punk bands, gospel bands. Every punk band, every hardcore punk band in LA wanted that one acoustic track in the middle of the album to show the softer side of the punk band. And they would call me to put some cello layered chords
And
underneath.
you were where at the time? You were at USC?
I was at USC, and I made my dorm room into a makeshift recording studio and taught myself multi-track software recording and producing and audio editing, so that I could contribute to these records and these bands. And I really enjoyed that process. And in a way, that was sort of the introduction of like the idea of architecture coming back into something I loved when I was growing up. I idolized a lot of architects growing up. And so the production and the shifting around of musical blocks on a computer screen and creating this piece and thinking about how things are put together.
Musical Lego.
Musical Legos, exactly. And music is, simply just architecture in auditory form. And composition is architecture for musicians. So that was my introduction back, sort of edging into the world of composition. After graduating, I joined the Harlem Quartet, and we toured a lot with Chick Corea. And through talking with Chick while on tour and through improvising with him on stage and with his encouragement, the encouragement was mainly for me to take more and more risks on stage in performance with him. He basically said to me, I sense you're holding back. Whenever, you have your 16 bars of solo on whatever Thelonious' Round Midnight, I just sense you're playing what you think jazz should be, and you're not playing Paul. So to receive those words of kind of encouragement from Chick completely changed my life, not just on stage. And I took so many risks, I think he really regretted telling me that. It's like
Having that essentially in your formative early career years, having that exposure to jazz as opposed to, say, a classical background, what did that do to you in terms of your future work?
That was the beginning of realizing how connected everything is. And another thing when on tour with Chick, we didn't talk about, chords and jazz theory. We talked about Yevgeny Kissin or Mozart, or how Bartók and Mozart are related, and it was all the same to Chick. And to me, it was in these completely separate parcels up until that point. And I realized that it's all the same, and Chick, if you can find his recordings of the Mozart piano concertos, they're unbelievable. And so that really, I think about that on a weekly basis still, his relationship to music, and and I have to apologize to my Harlem Quartet mates. At that point, I said, I shouldn't be here. I should be writing music. So I quit the quartet after touring with Chick, and Chick inspired me to start composing as well. And sitting on just to the right of him on stage, on these little stages like the Blue Note in New York, and just watching him improvise night after night. There's just so little differentiation between composition and improvisation in Chick's musical language. It's like he's just writing a piece on the fly. If you were to transcribe his solos, they would be these beautiful, beautiful compositions. They are, in fact, compositions. And then I realized, maybe, I love improvising. Maybe I could be a composer. So I left the quartet and devoted a couple of years to writing, and I turned down a lot of cello gigs. And the Parker Quartet, who knew me as a cellist at the time, the Grammy-winning string quartet, said, Paul, we hear you're writing music. Is that true? Do you want to write us a piece? And that was my first real concert work. I think that was 2012. And then as I was writing this piece, my first ever concert piece, my father passed away while I was in the process of writing it. And, as someone totally new to composition, already feeling like a fish out of water, I felt there's just no way, I didn't have the tools to be able to incorporate my grief into my composition. I just didn't have the experience yet to be able to channel the way I can, in a way, I'm better at channeling into my cello playing, grief and what I've experienced and what, something that I'm going through. I've been doing that my whole life. But through composition, that felt different. So I stopped writing for a couple of months, and then I started thinking about my father's life and his films, and just slowly started writing music about him that I felt were related to him, and just really, really kind of sad music, obviously. And then I got into this little rhythm of thinking about his films and celebrating different aspects of his life that were not all sad. And this piece essentially became a tribute to him. And, it helped that there was
Did it unlock something that allowed you to transcend what you had previously done in terms of composing?
It absolutely did. There's a blockage there between the art and the experience that just sort of became unblocked through trial and error and, struggling through the imposter syndrome and all of that. So the piece eventually came to be, and having a deadline helped, and the fact that I was already paid to write it helped. And then the Parker Quartet premiered this piece, which is called Strange Beloved Land, which was the name of a book that my father had written about Romania. And the experience of watching the Parker Quartet play this piece, that was the moment that I knew I was a composer. And it was a terrifying moment to be in the audience, to have made a thing, and to watch the thing happen, and you have no control. You're sitting, I'm used to, it's like someone teaching someone else you're a teenager how to drive for the first time, and you're in the passenger seat, and you slam on the brakes, But thankfully, the Parker Quartet, they're absolutely brilliant. So there wasn't much to worry about, but it was an odd feeling for a control freak like me to just let go, let something that I've created unfold in real time, publicly, for everyone else to judge, and there's nothing I can do.
What's the difference between the satisfaction or the experience you have when you're performing someone else's compositions on stage and when you're performing or just even listening to something that you've composed?
Control is one of them. There's a directness. You're fueled by endorphins and adrenaline, and when you're on stage, especially in chamber music with colleagues, there's an animal side of you that is awakened, especially in a piece like Shaker Loops by John Adams, and especially here, if you have 3 hours to put this epic piece together, when you're all shaking in sync. And it's very easy to get off, and everyone's reading a very complicated score, and so you can't just look up and stare at each other. You have to feel with your body, somehow just see the whole room. You might catch a glimpse of someone's elbow bobbing up and down, and that might be your cue, like, okay, great, we're in sync, or oh, I'm a little off, or just the way someone's breathing or moving in your periphery. You have to be completely activated physically to be a part of an ensemble like that. Composition is one of the loneliest pursuits that I can think of, maybe besides being a writer or something. Just the amount of space that you need, the amount of space and quiet, like a buffer zone that you need to create around yourself in order to write music. And the process of writing music, you're thinking about that, at least I'm thinking about the experience of performing and just trying to imagine that in my mind, and what is this going to feel like to play? And that's the challenge, and that's where the 20 years of experience as a cellist before writing a single note down has come in very handy, because I can sort of immediately know what it will feel like to play, you know. I'm not sure if that answers your question, but
how do you go about composing? Do you sit down and write stuff on a piece of paper? Do you sing? I mean, what's your process?
Since I'm a self-taught composer, Mozart, for example, would, every morning he would write out symphonies that were, already composed by people before him, like Haydn, just to get quick at writing notes down. And he would spend, that would be like going for running laps as a composer. You have to be fast at that if you're Mozart. Nowadays, I don't have the ability. I'm the worst. If you ask me to draw a treble clef, you won't be able to tell what it is. It'll just look like a squiggle. So I use all of the technology that I picked up in my life, including working with these punk bands and teaching myself how to record music. That's my, scribbling notes down on a cocktail napkin. My version is just recording it into a computer, improvising. I have somehow, like an animal living on a desert island who picks up these strange abilities, I have somehow taught myself how to play violin and viola like a tiny cello. And I rely on that skill heavily when I'm writing, especially string quartets or something. So I will record the violin part on my lap, and capture all of my ideas in audio form, and then kind of build a thing out of those pieces. And then the actual step of writing it down onto a piece of paper, that's the very last step in the process.
What do you do when you travel? Because you tour, you perform other people's works, and I assume that the composing, you said it's lonely, it I'm sure requires chunks of concentration time, and you're in hotels and you're getting up at weird hours in order to fly to wherever. How do you do it?
I don't. If it's if there's a melody or something that I just have to capture, and I'm in the shower or something in a hotel room, I will keep humming it to myself as I towel off, and keep humming it to myself until I get to my phone, hit record, and then hum it into my phone. And then I know at least it's somewhere. And most of those ideas don't end up anywhere, so I have just hundreds of random melodies on my phone. But someday when I have real, writer's block, I'll go back in there and I'll be very grateful to previous Paul for capturing some of these melodies.
When you have commissions, do you have to just take time and separate yourself from the world in order to get them done?
Yes, it's very difficult to multitask and to switch from sort of a rehearsal performance mindset into a composition mindset. For me, those are very different parts of the brain, and I'm also terrified of stealing music from my friends. So, if I'm working on a great piece by Andrea L, and then I immediately sit down to write a piece, that's a little dangerous for me. I don't want Andy's music kind of sneaking into my own, or...
I suppose it's like a writer who, they have to be careful what they're reading while they're writing, so that they're not influenced by the style of what they're reading.
Precisely. And to a certain extent, you can't avoid that, because we're all living in this musical world together and sharing everything else. But to really make sure that music is, a product of who you are as a person, takes a little bit of space.
Chamber music here. You kind of eased in a sense, because you came for several years before taking over from Jeff. What did you learn in that sort of, in the warm-up years, if you will, and what did you learn from Jeff?
I never in a million years would have guessed that I would end up in this position. I came here first as composer in residence. Jeff had heard my cello quartet for 4 cellos. And was a hi-fi, total hi-fi geek. Everything had to be on vinyl through the greatest stereo system you could possibly have. And we spent hours in his basement listening to records and comparing.
Yeah, tens of thousands.
Oh, yeah, and they're still there. And we would, just A, B, what does Kind of Blue sound like in stereo? It's like, no, I think the mono is better. Let's listen to the whole album again in mono. And it was glorious. And his wife Livia said that this cello quartet was the only piece that he was willing to plug in the little Bluetooth receiver, because it doesn't exist on vinyl, and then stream it through someone's phone or an iPad or something. That's the only piece. Everything else had to be on vinyl, but he would make an exception. And that's sort of what brought me here, was that piece in a way. And he was so accepting of me right away as a person. And then, we played some little tunes together, and he's like, "Oh, you can play cello too. Great, come back next year as a cellist." And then a few years as a cellist. And the main thing I was always, we were all in awe of Jeff every day here. And every day I would tell him something like, "Man, I could never do what you do. I just could never do what you do." And part of me thinks it's because I said that. He said, "You should do what I do." And he never gave me advice. He never went out of his way to teach me anything or give me tips, but I have never learned more from any single person than I learned from Jeff Nuttall. I still think about him every day. And this job, it took me a while to come to grips with the scope of it and the tradition of it, and what Jeff did and how to continue that. And it's been a complicated year in sort of mentally and emotionally preparing for it. And it sort of didn't hit me until I was on the plane from Hanover, was the last stop on this Kronos tour a couple weeks ago. On the plane from Hanover to Charleston, and I was going over the programs for the Chamber series, and started to just well up with emotion, because I just really badly wanted Jeff to be a part of it. And I was so, just the thought of, I shouldn't even let myself go there, but the thought of like, oh, what if we could have, what if Jeff was in the Bieber? What if we could play this together, that together? And then, and that led to this feeling of, I think he would have been very excited to see some of these things. And I started to feel excited. And then I started to feel really excited to just play this music and to share it with everyone. And then it turned into this strange kind of ecstasy. Also, that maybe this kind of thing can only happen when you're a few miles in the air over the middle of the Atlantic Ocean or something. But, you cry at stupid movies. At least I do when I'm on a long flight. Otherwise, movies I would not otherwise cry during. But
or even watch.
Yeah, exactly. But I started in that moment, as I said before, I told Jeff I could never do what you do. And in that moment, I lost it. I became a puddle, and I wept and wept because I felt so excited to share these programs. And there was this radiating, I was like, oh my gosh, it's happening. And I know that Jeff, that's the part of the job that drove Jeff too, because he loved it. And he loved this job. And I think he knew that eventually I would realize that I would love it too. And that happened on that plane ride. And
you told me he didn't give you any advice, but he did give you something else.
Before he died, he gave me a hefty garbage bag full of the most ridiculous Hawaiian that were given to him by Peter Sellers. And they're about 6 sizes too small for me, and he knew that. He said, just, keep doing the keto thing like me, and maybe, this will be a motivator for you, as I'm never going to fit into these shirts, but I still have them. And that's kind of inspired some of the outfits that you see all of us wearing. And I try to encourage the artists also to wear what makes them feel most like the artist that they are, because that's, how Jeff made me feel.
Well, he always had free-form wardrobe combinations. I see you're wearing cool shoes.
Oh, thank you.
When you program, how many months does it take to put together what we're seeing over the course of the 11 programs? And how do you do it? Is it you pick the people first, or do you pick the music first? Do you know all the music ahead of time? I mean, how do you put this all together?
My life is just a swirling, chaotic mess of music, and I don't know where a lot of it comes from. It's a combination of everything you just said. The people do come first, the players that you see. Each of them comes with their own world of experience and expertise. And in Ian's case, our great percussionist, he comes with a community of collaborators that he's been working with his whole life, like Andy Akiho and Christopher Cerrone. And so it's like just getting a whole world, a whole community here in the package of a single person. And that was sort of the process of curating as well. I was in very close communication with all of the artists, and since there's so little time to put these programs together when we're all in the building together, a lot of it has to be, it doesn't have to be, but it's very helpful if some of these pieces are in someone's fingers already, and they can either kind of help show the rest of the ensemble how to play it, like Carrot Revolution, which we did, this wild piece by Gabriella Smith. If Ayane had not known that piece inside and out, there's no way we could have done it here. We would have fallen apart within 3 measures, because it's so complex, and she has that piece, it's in her bones. And the same goes for, the Mendelssohn Quartet. I think Livia and Sterling, they had played it in another combination recently, last year or last season, and just having that sort of, that unit come pre-packaged, that experience, and it really helps this place go.
It would be difficult. I mean, you have a whole cast of characters lined up, and you've got to figure out what music they can play in what combinations.
Exactly. And
it was weird a couple of years ago when everybody was dropping like flies with COVID, and it was sort of like, okay, today we're not playing this, but we are playing this because these 3 people know it.
And that's not far from how it's programmed usually.
Really?
And we want to draw on everyone's strengths who's here, and I want all the artists to be happy too, and to be kind of in their element, in their zone, when they're on stage. So if they have something they really want to play, Alexi Kenny, the violinist, that kid can play anything, and he doesn't have to practice. It's infuriating. But he said, I love Amy Young. I love Schumann. We have the Schumann project we're putting together. We plan to record it. And I know Alexi and I know Amy, and I said, God, yes. Are you kidding me? Please play a Schumann violin sonata. And, it's not like, I love Schumann violin sonata. Who doesn't? And let's randomly have. It has to be that perfect synergy between the performer, the desire, the program, the composer. But the performer comes first. And then, that's basically what my job is. It's not, I want you to hear all of my favorite music. I love everything anyway, so I wouldn't even know where to begin. in a way, it's the easiest job in the world and it's the hardest job in the world. So just organizing all of those factors to make sure everyone is kind of feeling like they're in their prime on stage.
When do you have to start? I mean, I assume that a lot of these performers have schedules that are 3 years out in many cases, so you have to figure out who's available and what you can do. Have you started on next year already?
Programming, yes. Artists, not yet. It's tricky, but Spoleto actually happens in a really nice pocket between the end of the season and where a lot of summer festivals happen in the U.S. It's just like a little bit of downtime for a lot of artists in their schedule. So that's awesome. Let's not change that. But in terms of programming, I think I started about a year ago, just after the last festival.
So it kind of takes a whole year to make this happen.
Then we like to at least have the program set 2 or 3 months in advance so that people can learn this crazy stuff. And the bulk of the programming, I would say it took me maybe 2-3 months, and it's a slow process, and I relied heavily on the artists. And Livia Sohn, of course, with her expertise was like my consigliere, and Ayane Kozasa, my partner, she's always, whispering in my, have you heard this piece? Have you heard this piece? Have you heard this Bieber Batali? You're going to like it. You get to stomp your feet in it. And I was like, ooh, okay. And so, it really is a family and community effort, and that's just kind of the spirit of Charleston, the spirit of Spoleto. It's a beautiful thing.
How did you meet Ayane?
Ayane and I met at the Marlborough Music Festival. I was visiting as a sort of alumni or whatever, and she was participating. She was performing in an Elgar piano quartet, I believe. And there's a big, juicy viola solo, and I didn't know her very well at the time, but when the solo came around, she was so kind of facing inward toward the group, and the first note of the solo, she went, and so that the F holes in the instrument would face the audience so that we could hear, and it was just so blatant and straightforward. This is a viola solo, and then the solo that happened was just so beautiful and so lovely and fun and warm, and it was basically love at first viola solo, I guess.
And the two of you live in Cincinnati at the moment.
Yes, Ayane is the professor of viola at the Cincinnati Conservatory of Music. I'm just there because of her. Most of the time I'm traveling or rehearsing with Kronos in San Francisco.
And what do you play together when you're not working? What do you listen to? What do you play?
We listen to everything, which used to be a hobby, and now it's a job, to research and program for here. It's really fun. We have a little duo called Ayane and Paul. That's basically one gig every 5 years, basically for my mom. But it's been nice. We've actually commissioned a couple of really great new works for viola and cello that are quite popular with students. And but generally we just like to cook together, and we don't see each other very often, so it's always
That'll be better when you're both in Kronos.
We're gonna see each other a lot more, next season, that's for sure.
Now, I read that everywhere you go, you take a fly fishing rod.
I used to, yes. When I know that I might have an hour between rehearsals to go to some gross river in the middle of some European city. It doesn't matter where. It could be in the middle of a public park in downtown. I am one of those weird guys who will just take his fishing rod out and start fishing
You're not the only one. I just did a profile of the author Percival Everett, who wrote Erasure, which became, I'm trying to think of the name of the movie, but it was just an Oscar-nominated movie. And American Fiction, yes, absolutely. And he does that everywhere he goes. He
Really?
takes a fly fishing rod, and and he ties his own flies, and
Yeah.
it's almost like an obsessive art with him. Do you do that?
It's the same. The best gift Ayane ever got me for my birthday was a fly tying vise, and it ruined my life for a year. I could do just something about the beauty of something so small that only you and a fish will ever see. It's just, I love it so much. But these real weird people in like Central Park in New York who will fish in that's me. It's a problem.
Do you throw them back?
Of course.
That's good. Do you still play or listen to things like punk bands?
Oh, all the time. We have our own record player, and I still play with and record for and work on all sorts of albums. Friends of mine in punk bands are experimental drummers or singer-songwriters. It's become more of a hobby now than a profession, but like Ayane and I, a couple years ago, Nora Jones came over to our apartment and said, I want strings on my record. I've always had a phobia with strings for some reason, but I just heard this piece that you wrote called American Haiku, and I think you two, so Ayane and I are on a Nora Jones record called Pick Me Up Off the Floor. There's a little viola cello melodies on a few of those songs, and it's just, it's fun. It's a lot of fun.
Tell us about your cello.
My cello was made by Mario Morales, who is he's a wild man living in the Angeles National Forest. At least that's where his instrument making studio is, and he goes out there. He's the sweetest guy. He has he'll go to Cremona, of course, and pick out the wood for this instrument. My cello was made in 2010, but the wood is from, I think it's 1761 or something. And Mario, it's a copy of one of Yo-Yo Ma's main instrument, his Montagnana. And about 15 years ago, Yo-Yo asked Mario to make him a copy of, I guess, like a backup copy, or like his outdoor cello or something. If it's like a rainy day, get out my extra, my backup. So Yo-Yo actually, so he commissioned Mario to make him a copy of his Montagnana, and then Yo-Yo let me borrow that cello for about a year, because I also I was like, I love that cello. So he let me use his cello for a year while Mario made me another copy of Yo-Yo's Montagnana, which was very, very kind. And I love the cello. It's the only thing I'll ever be able to afford to own.
Why did you want a new one as opposed to trying to figure out how to get your hands on an old one?
Well, it's a bit of a struggle these days for young players to get their hands on an old instrument. You either have to win a huge competition or have a very wealthy benefactor loan it to you for a period of time, and even if you're lucky enough to be one of those few, there's always a chance that the instrument will just be, sorry, contract's up, or sorry, there's another young musician who, it's time for them to have their 3 years with the Strat or whatever. And the other, issue, there are a lot of collectors who kind of keep these instruments in vaults, and they just accumulate value until it's completely unrealistic for a musician to actually play one or own one.
But don't they need to be played?
They do. Yes, it's a complicated thing. So there's a kind of a recent boom in instrument makers now who are making really, really incredible instruments, and a lot of the most famous players around are playing on modern instruments now. It's just because they're affordable, basically.
I read someplace that you said that when you became a composer, that it completely changed how you play the cello?
Absolutely. Once you have experienced the struggle of composing a piece, it changes. Even when I think of someone like Schumann and what it takes to write a piece of music down, your opinion as a player, it almost doesn't matter anymore. And we're all kind of taught that in school as performers. Your job is to interpret, to do the composer justice. But once you've composed a piece, you realize that's just scratching the surface. You owe your heart and your soul, and every second that you spend performing a piece should be spent in service of what the composer is trying to tell you through these dots on the page. And that there's so much more information in scores than I realized that composers are trying to tell us, because I've struggled with all of these things. We still have the same 3 or 4 little symbols that we have been using for 400 years. They have the dot, the dash, the accent. That's basically it. The dot means a note is short, bum. A dash means a note is long, bum. An accent means it's accented, bum. That's all we got. We have to create universes with these 3 tools. And so we study what those symbols meant to Schumann, Bach, Beethoven, Rina Esmail. We have the luxury of asking Rina, what did you mean by this dash? And she'll tell us. And it's an absolutely a beautiful thing to go back into a Beethoven sonata and look at a dash and actually think beyond what my first cello teacher may have told me. A dash means long or whatever, and actually try to get inside of Beethoven's mind. And what does the dash mean in the context of the phrase? What is he trying to tell me? Does he set up a pattern within the piece where he's sort of giving you a tutorial on what the dash means as the piece goes along based on where he uses it? And there are all of these clues, because it wasn't cool back in the day to have a note on the cover of the score saying, the dashes mean to play it long unless it's like, no, that wasn't a part of the tradition then. It's just, it just takes a close, we have to examine these works more closely now to figure that out. But the information is usually there if you're willing to put yourself through that process as a performer. So that's the main thing, is just, it makes me cherish all of the composers who have come before me even more, and the struggle that it is to translate an idea like Brahms' cello sonata. And how do you possibly write down notes and dots and dashes to express truly, how do you do it? It's a losing battle unless people are willing to look beyond the dots and the dashes and figure out, what did Brahms want?
So that means a lot of research.
That means a lot of empathy, yeah, and a lot of just paying close attention and not letting your own interpretation as a performer ever override the intention of the composer.
With chamber music, the people here, do you think that you'll sort of, it's almost, the audiences take everybody personally, and it's like they're part of the family in a way, and you've brought back some of the faces we know, but you've brought in new faces as well. So what's your philosophy on who to bring and how to bring them, and whether they are a family or whether you bring new people every year, or how's it going to shake out?
It's going to be a very big family. Every face that you see on this stage is someone that I care deeply about, and some of them are people that I met 3 days ago. Grant, I've never met him in real life before, but I knew after researching him and listening to him and hearing him speak, I knew he belonged here, and I knew he belonged with us. And so it'll be, I think, it'll just be an expanding family. You'll see familiar faces, I think, every season, but there's just not enough spots for everyone that needs to be here all the time every year. I think, including all of the artists who are cycling in and out, I think maybe it's 22 or something, different individuals. And I love all of them dearly, but there are 70 more people that I wish you could have heard this season, So it's going to be just kind of balancing that and trying to get everyone back and in the rotation as much as possible, and what works with people's schedules. But that's sort of the plan.
How often will we hear your compositions?
Well, I'm giving everybody a break this year. Jeff he programmed a piece of mine basically every year since we met, which was so lovely of him. And, there are just so many incredible composers that I just want you to know about. And you already basically know me. You can Google me anytime and listen to whatever. But I want to provide this platform of Spoleto for incredibly deserving composers to be heard, because it's a really important place.
Well, I bet, though, that people would want to hear something from you from time to time.
Well,
See?
thank you.
This is a really dumb question that I'm going to ask, and then I'm going to turn it over to questions. When we see all kinds of lights flashing around and little patterns on the curtain moving around, and sometimes on the ceiling now. What's that about?
So we are trying out some new things here. The programs, they go by at light speed here. So there's our trusty lighting designer, Noah. And Noah lives up in that, I think he lives there. I think he has a little apartment up there that's what it feels like anyway. And he is at every sound check in the morning, and sometimes there's time for us to kind of work out a lighting scheme for pieces like the Jonathan Dove and, more dramatic lighting. And other times, I'm kind of encouraging Noah to express himself as a lighting designer and work with the artists to just kind of make it a little bit more immersive and fun. And, Kronos Quartet travels with our own lighting designer and our own sound engineer, and they're like the 5th and 6th members of the quartet. And so I've really kind of grown accustomed to having some cool lighting, and the idea of having, some fun lights with Mendelssohn, just, it sounds fun to me,
Yeah.
And
So that I promised to do questions, but that raises the question of doing new cool things. How do you encourage people under the age of 70 to sit in the seats?
Flashing lights? I don't know. I have no answer to that, nor do I really have a specific plan other than to kind of follow my heart with the programming and with the artists. And I think through the energy that we generate here, and hopefully people will, understand what we're trying to do together with all of you, and for this to be a sort of a place where we can generate life and music and love and light and sound together. And I think the young people will come. They will just come. I've already gotten so much feedback from younger people who have been in the audiences recently, and it's wonderful to have people who just like, I loved the John Adams so much, or I loved the Christopher Cerrone, and some people are like, oh, I couldn't wait for it to be over, and oh gosh, I'm so tired of Schubert. Oh God, I love the Schubert, and I get it all, and that it makes me so happy that it's a conversation again, and I think being honest with ourselves about it at every step in the process, for me, that's key, and I am drawn to places where that happens, whether it's Mozart or Rina Esmail. If it's being presented honestly and with love, I want to be a part of it. Whether it's conservative or progressive, it doesn't really matter, if the heart is in the right place. So hopefully, kind of turning this place even more into what Jeff Noddle was sort of traveling towards, like a beacon of creativity and honesty and expression and embracing of all types of music, including Mozart and Bach and Beethoven. I just think there's a sort of spirit there that will draw people in.
I think it's time for questions. Could we have the lights up so that I can see people who... good.
Thank you, Noah.
Thank you. Any questions? Straight back there, the lady. Someone is coming to you with a microphone.
In your opinion, Paul, how does the Spoleto Chamber Music Festival differ from other music festivals around the country or the world, or does it?
I'm trying to think of what it has in common with other music festivals. First of all, the whole format of the festival, all the different facets, opera, orchestra, chorus, jazz, pop, it's like just a whole universe in a town. Bless you. And that's really exciting, just to be, even though we don't have time to see that much else, if I sneak out and get to see the creation, and you just get a sense like, oh, there's so much good stuff happening here, and that all kind of concentrates into the dock street when we're rehearsing, because we know we're sort of at the center of this storm of creativity, which just makes everyone vibrate a little bit, kind of gets us all amped up to be a part of that. In terms of the chamber series and the chamber audience, the relationship that the artists that I have with you is, I have never experienced that at any other festival or on any other series. It's why I love coming here so much, and it's the first thing that I noticed about Charleston and Spoleto, is that direct bond that we want to have with everyone who comes to the show. And but when I was first here as composer in residence, multiple people actually rolled down their windows on the street to yell something at me while I was just walking to get a coffee or something. And at first, after living in New York for 10 years, I was like, oh God, what are they gonna say? And the very first one was, "Love your shirt." And I was like, oh, thank you. And then it happened again. "Oh, we loved your piece." Are you kidding me? Someone is stopping at an intersection at great personal risk to their vehicle and to tell me that they loved a piece for 4 cellos? And it was just so, I was like, I want all of my friends to experience this level of support and love and joy, and they are, and thank you for that. Just, it's a wonderful place for artists to feel safe and appreciated and in dialogue with everyone. And that, to me, that's the biggest and most important difference that I feel here that I don't get everywhere else, is that just the direct line of communication. And I welcome it and I cherish it, and I look forward to continuing that with all of you. And if you see any of the artists at any point walking on the sidewalk, roll down the window, yell anything you want at them, because they're waiting for it. Sydney is on her way.
The microphone is almost there.
First of all, welcome. I'm so happy you're here. I've loved everything so far this year, and I look
Thank you.
forward to many more years with you.
Thank
But
you.
I was wondering about young people attending performances. Have you considered evening offerings of the chamber music to sort of broaden your?
Yeah, there is. There is. That's part of the discussion, actually, that's on the table right now. Is if we can possibly reimagine the format a little bit of chamber music, because it wouldn't be lovely to, I don't know, expand it and have evening, even incorporate other venues or do little side shows at a club or whatever. I'm already pushing all the artists to their absolute maximum, of course, and the whole festival is aware of that and extends their support to all of us really, really beautifully. So that's the main challenge: is do we have the bandwidth to add more? And but if you have ideas, please, as I said, this is a dialogue. But I think everyone is constantly thinking about, is this still the best possible format for what we're doing? It's kind of amazing that flexibility is kind of built into the festival.
Has there been any kind of thought or consideration for, say, a chamber music version of young people's concerts?
That is also on the docket, to have sort of a young artist program eventually integrated into the chamber program, to have maybe like a fellowship ensemble full of, very promising, like Sterling Elliott's like 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Sterling
I'm
Elliott.
also thinking about just the Bernstein Young People's Concerts to teach young people, because kids aren't learning music in school necessarily anymore. And so how are they ever going to become fans if their exposure isn't there?
Right. Well, this year, while I was finishing up on tour with Kronos, I got here, I think, the day before the first chamber concert. So we just threw that program together. But a handful of artists, Ayane, Owen Dalby, and Raman Ramakrishnan, got here about 5 days before the start to start making the rounds at the local schools and doing presentations for children. And that's one of Ayane's true specialties, is working with kids and introducing kids to music and putting on these incredible sort of presentations for kids. She started with her old quartet called the Izuri Quartet, a web series during the pandemic called Izuri Kids, which sort of combines new music and science or cooking or art, and with the use of, she also loves stop motion animation and claymation, and so she made these beautifully scripted kids show, full kids show basically, with music at the center of it, and then these other subjects. So she will be bringing kind of that side of herself to Kronos, and that will be, hopefully there will be like a Kronos kids show in the future, which would be amazing. But she sort of led the charge this year with the community engagement, and they performed for 2 to 4 year olds also, which I didn't know was a thing. And performed some of Rina Esmail's music for 2-year-old kids, and it was beautiful, and that's her specialty. So we're trying to also kind of reinvigorate that side of the program here, and ideally have a relationship with these schools year-round and develop a relationship with them. So yeah, we're certainly working on that too.
This gentleman in the front, wait for the microphone.
The artist is comfortable with the intimacy of the setting as you are, and what did the artist think about Polgate?
Are the other artists as comfortable with the intimacy of the situation as I am, and what did they think about Polgate? If you're not aware of Polgate, there was a mic stand for the first couple of programs that was right there.
Oh, the thing that looked like the cell tower.
Yes, a cell tower, with an array of very, very expensive microphones perched at the top of this mic stand, which became known as the pole. And there was the situation became known as Polgate, because the stand was blocking the view for some of the performers. And yeah, that seems like a million years ago now. Our incredible recording engineer and recording producer, Andreas Meyer, multiple Grammy-winning producer, is backstage every concert, recording every single performance, and he's out here moving mics around between every piece. And so he, the pole, the mics that were being supported by the pole were very, very special mics, recording the concerts in Dolby Atmos, which is kind of an immersive audio experience. So the idea was like, well, maybe, we can get this festival into the world in Atmos, and people can listen to it and feel like they're at the Dock Street Theater. That would be wonderful. And when Andreas got here to set up the mics, we realized we couldn't fly anything in from the ceiling because of Song of Rome, which uses projections, and it would cast too many shadows. So the only thing we could do was the pole. And then after Polegate, we came up with an alternate solution, which was to use slightly more svelte mic stands, as Andreas put it. So it's a little bit more work for him, but he's an absolute whiz and is making the recording sound amazing without the pole. So yeah, thanks for everyone's patience.
Which raises...
I will tell Andreas he is appreciated.
Which raises the question, since we were told that all this wonderful recording is being done, how will it ever be possible to hear it? The festival is it's not being done by South Carolina ETV Radio anymore, and you can't hear the concerts slightly after they are performed. Where is it going?
I don't have all the answers right now. It's still sort of a big experiment this year, but many of the performances are being recorded with video. We have our incredible cinematographer, Joe, over here. Thank you, Joe. And all of the performances are being captured somehow and will be in the Spoleto archive and will be used here and there. The thing that's new this year is the involvement of Phenotypic Records, which is this incredible sort of humanitarian-focused, music-focused record label based in San Francisco. And it's all funded by Mike Hostetler, who is an incredible patron of the arts and just absolute music nerd beyond my wildest dreams. And he just wants the world to see the magic that we're making on this stage.
At some point, will people in the audience be able to go on Spotify or Apple iTunes or something and buy recordings or listen to this or get even CDs in the
Yes.
old-fashioned CDs?
So the plan right now, if everything works, there should be even more access to this music after the end of the festival. Sometimes it's been a little bit hard to dig out certain recordings that we like, after the festival's over. So part of this experiment this year will be, after the festival has concluded, I will personally curate 3 full albums worth of sort of the best of Spoleto Chamber Music 2024, and in conjunction with the artists' help, and these are some picky people we have up here, and it's going to be spectacular. I think we'll have 3 records, and those 3 albums will be spread far and wide on Spotify, and with hopefully a partnership with Apple Music, and I think the world is going to freak out a little bit when they hear what we're doing here. And I think that will definitely also help translate into what we call BIS, or butts in seats.
Wait for the microphone, please, so that we can hear you.
Sorry, John, it's coming. Thank you, Sydney. This is Sydney, our wonderful production manager backstage.
So part of this is observation. 3/4 of the way through the festival, I think I would say I've never seen in so many different productions the use of video, whether it was Romeo and Juliet, where the video was on stage and inside and outside the building. Song of Rome included video as part of the storytelling. Dark Noon, and maybe some other things that I haven't seen before. Lots of video. You've made reference to video and film. And I don't know where I'm going with this. It's an observation, but it's a technical thing. Is a change in media. What are your thoughts on this? And has Kronos used video? And just what are your thoughts on this?
Yes, video is certainly becoming a more prevalent part of classical performance these days, and new music and pieces that are being commissioned. And Kronos certainly has a lot of pieces where the video is a crucial component. There's a piece of an evening-length piece called Sun Rings by Terry Riley, and the video is just some of the first ever images captured of the sun, the surface of the sun, and they're like vintage photography, but these beautiful kind of, it's like you're watching a Charlie Chaplin film, except you're seeing it's like a corona or like a bloom of the surface of the sun.
Well, it's like the Yo-Yo Ma performance with the, it was either Hubble or Webb telescope pictures.
Exactly. And I think there are some cases in which the visuals can detract from a piece as well, if they're not really thoughtfully kind of integrated into the music. I think it would be lovely to integrate video into some of these pieces if we can. Here, the struggle is always time. And in sound checks for every performance, each group has between 0.5 minutes and 15 minutes to run through their thing. Noah's out here with the iPad with the lighting schematics on it, like, okay, do you need lighting? Okay, all right, let's do this, you know. And it's kind of like faith-based, that it's all just gonna work out. You know, in like the dramatic lighting for the Jonathan Dove, we had to actually, you know, an opera production will have a month to work out the kinks and the tech, and we have about 2 minutes. And we just kind of, with a little prayer, say, it's going to be fine. So there's always that consideration, but there is a lot of music that does go very nicely with video. And if you remember Stephen Prutzman's Buster Keaton flick last year, it was just brilliant.
Oh, that was great.
So we're hoping to do something like that again with Stephen.
Is it generational? Is it that there's an expectation? I mean, you go to a rock concert and it's everywhere. You go to Ringling Brothers' new version of the circus, and you could see everything up close that's on the stage, because people have an expectation of video and they have an expectation of the scene changing every couple of seconds.
Right. Exactly. I think there is an expectation, and deservedly so. I think we deserve to see the thing that we paid to see. And, you know, part of me wishes, like in the Christopher Cerrone, where Amy is doing this really delicate work inside of the piano.
I'd love to see it.
And to have a camera on there that's being projected, you know, so we can see, oh, there's blue tack there, and she's just touching this spot on the string gently. It's beautiful, but it's just a matter of time, you know, just to even be able to have time to put the blue tack in the piano. And I think that we forgot to take it out for one of Pedge's pieces. He was in the middle of the Nocturne with Todd Palmer, and he, in the middle of a beautiful piano melody, dun 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 plunk dun 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 dun. And I was like, oh no, we forgot to take the blue tack out. So we said, sorry, Andreas, we can't use that take. But
I hope that's fun.
yeah, those little things would be so fantastic, and we're figuring out ways that we can create the time to work on that sort of production element. And now I'm also learning the capabilities of the Dock Street and this incredible crew here, and with my experience with Kronos now, working with the crew of every big concert hall that we visit, it's just such a crucial part. It's really like a team effort to make any show happen. So getting to know, and Hank that you see back here at the soundboard, thank you, Hank. He's controlling the level of this microphone right now to make sure it's comfortable. You know, so Hank and Noah, Joe, Sydney, the whole crew, like, you know, we're working towards a thing together, and the more we get to know each other and what we can do here, the more we'll do here. It's very exciting. Thank you, John.
Graham, last question. The microphone's coming around.
Paul, any future plans to incorporate a foot-operated bass drum with your cello?
Wait, say that one more time. Can you repeat the question one more time?
Pardon?
Say it again.
Oh, is there any plan to incorporate future plan to incorporate a foot-operated bass drum with your cello?
Another piece with the kick drum? Actually, there might be. I've discovered a couple pieces through Kronos where I get to play that kick drum again. So there may be another appearance. Thanks.
I think we're kind of running out of time here, but I wanted to thank everybody for coming, and I want to thank Paul.
Thank you so much for having me. Thanks, everybody.